morning, everyone. I have never, ever done anything like this before. I have been in primary Sabbath school all my time here in Minnetonka Church. So I'm a little nervous. Lord, just give me the words to communicate your love, your grace, and your salvation. In primary Sabbath school, we learn an acronym for prayer. P is for praise, R is for repent, A is to ask, and Y is to yield. And today when I talk, I'm going to mostly focus on the asking and the yielding. And I'm going to cut this short because the Lord impressed me I didn't need to say all of this stuff. So I've got three instances. The first one happened this year, August 1st, 2021, at Denver International Airport. I had graduated from Union College, and it was our 50th year nursing class reunion. So all of you kids in here who are saying 50 years, my gosh, she's ancient. Well, yeah, I am a little older, but those 50 years went by so quick, they went like that. And after 18 months of COVID, I needed a vacation. So I had been in contact with three of the classmates. Darlene said, oh, I will arrange for a rental car. Now, we started this way back in the spring when rental cars were very difficult to arrange, but she arranged for the rental of a sedan. Esther and I met her at the airport, and we were to drive 2.5 hours from Denver to Kimball, Nebraska. That's where our reunion was going to be held. She went into the office for the rental car place, and she was in there, she was in there, she was in there, she was in there, and we were sitting out in the hot sun, like, come on, we want to get on the road. And finally she came out and she said, we do not have a car. Okay, what happened? Well, this particular company will not let us drive a car out of the state of Colorado. I had never heard of that before, and I said, well, I hope they aren't based in Rhode Island, but okay, we don't have a car. So we said a prayer, and she said, I'm going to get online, look for a car. And Esther said, I'll watch the luggage and things. And I said, I'm going to go back in the terminals, see if there's any little kiosks that could help us. Well, I came back out, and of course there was no kiosk. But Darlene had found a car for us. And great. And it was available on Sunday afternoon. Now, I was thinking in my mind, oh, there's no cars. I mean, they kept saying on the news, there's no rental cars. But she had found us a car, and I was still a little skeptical because I thought, okay, great, we've got a car. A two-door Toyota Corolla or a two-door Honda Civic, and I get the back seat with the luggage, in which I do not fit very well. So we arrived at the rental place. There was no lines. The young man asked to see our driver's license, saw Darlene's. He asked who's the secondary driver, and I said I am. And I think at this point, Jesus looked at the angels and said, let's have a little fun. And showed him my driver's license. And he looked at my license and he said, Oofta, Minnesota. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, you betcha. And so we had a conversation about Lefse and lutefisk and tater tot hot dish and going up north. And Esther, who is from Guam, just kind of looked like, okay, whatever. But we had a good laugh. And he said, okay, ladies, let's go car shopping. So I took off walking in the direction where the Honda Civics were. And he said, no, not those cars. Those are all spoken for. Those cars. And the ones he would point to were Toyota RAV4s. Okay, I just was amazed because here's a car that I would be comfortable driving in, riding in. I knew how to operate. There was room for 3 ladies and our luggage, and none of us traveled light. And yes, Jesus answered a prayer, and I think he had some fun with it, and so did we. And I'm thankful for that. So another story, and this one was sad, but God still worked. As most of you know, my oldest son was killed in a motor vehicle crash on April 8th, 2017. There was a lot of pain, there was a lot of grief. There was also unbelievable support from Pastor Jason, my church family, my co-workers, some friends, family, so many people. The state trooper that knocked on our door that 7:30, that Sabbath morning, did far more than just inform us. He was duty-bound to inform. He was not duty-bound to show kindness and compassion. And he showed kindness and compassion far above and beyond the call of duty. Several days after the crash, the funeral home called and said, come and pick up Chris's personal items. So I opened the bag, and in it, I found his smashed cell phone and his blood-stained wallet. I did not find his glasses, and I did not find the one item I wanted to keep above everything else, and that was his chess set, his portable chess set. Chris was an avid chess player, and he was very good at it. In fact, that Friday when he left the house, he had his chessboard under his arm and said, Mom, I'll see you at 6 p.m. I wanted that chess set. That was one item of his possessions I dearly wanted. I prayed, can that chess set somehow be found? So I called the same state trooper and I asked if the vehicle was still impounded. And he said, yes, it's still being impounded as part of the investigation. And he said, why are you asking? And I said, my son had his portable chess set. I really wanted that portable chess set. Now that state trooper could have said, it's gone, get over it. But he didn't. He said, I will look. A couple of days later, I got a phone call. He had not found the glasses, but he had found the chess set. He said the latch was open, the pieces were scattered all over, but he had found all but 2 pawns. And he said he had gone to the crash site. He had raked northbound around 13th Avenue, Highway 169, looking for those 2 pawns. He didn't find the 2 pawns, and after a while I said, well, one life was lost, one life is changed forever. But he found all the other pieces. Now, that state trooper didn't have to have compassion. He didn't have to have kindness. He certainly did not have to go and get a lawn rake and go and rake the side of Highway 169. But Jesus answered my prayer that that chess set could be found, and he did it through a state trooper. I don't know if that state trooper was a Christian or not, but I do know that Jesus used him to heal the grief of a mother. My last story is, I'm a retired ICU nurse. I worked at the University of Minnesota Medical Center in the medical ICU for 39 years and had previous jobs before that. I want to share about a miraculous answer to prayer. 7 o'clock in the morning, I come to work, stop at the desk to see which patient I have, and I look, and the charge nurse says, I put you in that room for a reason. Okay, when they say that, that usually tells you this is not going to be a good day. It's your first clue. I sit down with a night nurse and I start receiving report, and she says, I hope you had a good night's rest. Oh boy, this is sounding worse by the minute. So she starts giving report, and I'm going to use some medical terms here for those of you that are medical people will understand them. Those of you that aren't, you probably won't. So I'm told I have a 65-year-old male. He was admitted with pneumonia. He now has adult respiratory distress syndrome with a whited out chest x-ray. He has had a myocardial infarction or a heart attack, and he's had 2 CVAs or 2 strokes that were revealed on a CAT scan. He's non-responsive. He's had no urine output for 36 hours. He's on 100% oxygen, and normal room air is about 21% oxygen, with a PEEP of 15 on a ventilator, and he's maxed out on 4 different IV vasopressors with a mean arterial pressure of 50. Okay, this is just not a good situation. Oh, and his INR is 10, and that's a blood clotting test. And he's up 50 pounds since admission weight, and it's all retained fluid. His brain, some of his brain reflexes are intact, so he's not brain dead. Machines and drugs are keeping this man alive. And then the night nurse says the clincher. The son is a lawyer, and the son is very upset with the medical staff. And the son is also a devout Christian. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a long 12 hours, a very long 12 hours. The son is adamant that hemodialysis be started. But the patient does not have a hemodialysis line and fluid in place. And the son is adamant that if this dialysis is done, his dad is going to live. God will perform a miracle if only the doctors and the nurses cooperate and get that line put in. Well, I keep thinking, oh, this is going to be a long 12 hours. I need some help. And I asked Jesus for some patience, some tact, and wisdom in dealing with this son and his family. And I entered the room, I introduced myself, and as I begin the morning cares that I usually do for a patient, the son keeps saying, when are you going to get that line in? Haven't you talked to that doctor yet about getting that line in? I want that line in now. And the physicians have told him it's not safe. With an INR of 10, the patient will have uncontrollable bleeding and will bleed to death if we put the line in. The physician comes in and the son is just very angry and frustrated and asking the doctors to put the line in and start dialysis. And the physician says, ethically, I cannot do that. I will not kill a patient. And the son is even more frustrated, and I'm praying, asking Jesus, help me to get this son to understand what's going on here. So I asked him, what does he understand of dialysis? And we talked, and I drew some pictures and told him what all was going on, reiterated what he had been told before. So he asks, well, are drugs ever used? And I said, oh yes, drugs are used to increase urine output. That's very common. He said, well, what drug? And I told him, well, your dad had Lasix previously. And he says, I want my dad to have the maximum dose possible of Lasix, and I want it now, because it will work and he will recover. Okay, so I asked the doctor, I said, okay. I went and I asked the doctor. The doctor, rather reluctantly, understandably, wrote the order, and I went to the med room and got the Lasix, and I was praying for wisdom. How can I get through to this man? Give me the words, Lord. Lord, just give me the words to speak to this gentleman. And as I am working, I hear my voice, Gideon. Gideon, Gideon, and I keep hearing that. I put the Lasix on the bedside table, was going to draw it up, and I keep hearing, Gideon, Gideon. So I asked the son, do you remember the Bible story of Gideon? And he said, well, of course. Gideon laid the fleece before the Lord, and the Lord answered and told him what to do. And he said, are you thinking that this is a Gideon test? And I told him, I just keep hearing the word Gideon in my mind. And I said, I'm not sure. I just keep hearing the word Gideon in my mind. Now, I was getting a little nervous because the university is a public institution. It's not a private hospital and not religiously affiliated. And there's some pretty strict policies as to what you can and cannot say to patients and patients' families in regard to religious matters. So I'm like, ooh, I'm kind of overstepping some boundaries here. But I just keep hearing the word Gideon. And so the son says, can we pray? And I said, certainly. And so we prayed over the Lasix. I have never before prayed over a vial of Lasix, but we prayed over a vial of Lasix. And the son asked that Jesus heal his dad. He asked that the Lasix work, but then he asked something else. He said, Jesus, your will be done. So I gave the Lasix, waited for about an hour, and all this time he's telling me it's about his dad. His dad was a devout Christian. He raised the family in the love of the Lord. He was a Sunday school teacher. He was part of the praise team. He was a retired high school social studies teacher. He was loved by his students. And one of the dad's greatest joys was telling others about Jesus. The son also told me, Mom and my siblings are on their way. They are ready to let Dad go. But they've deferred to me because I am the oldest son, And as this hour is progressing, I'm looking at the monitors and all my numbers are looking worse. And then Jesus talked to me again. And Jesus said, share this with you. Share this with this man. And I was a little scared because what the verses I kept hearing almost made it sound like I was going to deny this man's faith. But I heard the voices saying, share. So I shared. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command and the voice of the archangel and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first, and after that we who are still alive and left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we shall ever be with the Lord forever. And the other verse that kept coming to my mind to share I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day, not only to me, but also all who long for his appearing. I shared those verses with him. He turned around, he looked out the window. He was crying, but he didn't say anything. And I just sensed that he was talking things over with God. And after a few minutes, he turned around, he looked at me, and he said, I have to yield. I've prayed and prayed and prayed and asked and asked and asked, but now I have to yield. Stop the vasopressors, take out the breathing tube, stop the vent, keep my dad comfortable. Mother texted me, she's on her way. They'll be here in 10 minutes. And we agreed that Mother and the siblings would say goodbye, that we would extubate his dad. I went in and asked the physician for a comfort care order. And you can imagine this physician is probably looking at me like, I knew you were a little crazy, Connie, but now I'm convinced. First you want a Lasix order, now you want a comfort care order. What is going on? And I just said, it's a God thing. He said, okay. He wrote the comfort care order. The mother, the siblings arrived, and of course the appropriate response, they were crying. They said goodbye. They asked, can we sing some hymns? And I said, please do. And they sang several hymns, and then they said, okay. Respiratory therapy came in. They removed the breathing tube. I turned off the vasopressors. The patient never took a breath, and the EKG was flat within a few minutes. Was it the answer that son was hoping for? No. Was it an answer for prayer? Yes. Was it a miracle? Yes. And you say, how was it a miracle? First of all, in the absolute worst situation of his life, this son came to the point of yielding his will to God. Also, it was a miracle that this family was now totally united in their decision. No bickering, no arguing, no blaming, just totally united. And that's a miracle. And if you that work in the medical profession know that that does not always happen. And that's a miracle when that happens. Third, his father passed away very peacefully without CPR and all the complications of that. But fourth, it renewed my faith that as we listen to God's voice, He will give us the words to say, to spread the good news to others.
I'm going to open my story with the last sentence of James 4:16. When a believing person prays, great things happen. Some of you have lived my story with me, but some of you haven't, and so I will refresh your memory or give you a new one. About 30 years ago, we had a beautiful, bouncing year-old baby that was my granddaughter. Thrilled to death with her. She was beautiful, she was wonderful. Her parents decided to take a long weekend and go to see her grandmother in Canada, her other grandmother, and to spend a little time in Washington relaxing. They were leaving on Thursday. On Wednesday, my granddaughter came down with a fever. And so they were quite concerned because the arrangements were all made, the tickets bought and everything. So they took her to the doctor, and the doctor said, you know, I think she's going to be fine. I think this is just a childhood fever, and I think that keep her hydrated and you'll be fine. So they left on Thursday. They spent a rather wakeful night, they said, when they got off the plane. And Friday, they were going over to see my mother-in-law, who lived on Vancouver Island. On the ferry going over, Marley went comatose. And they didn't know exactly what to do or where to go, and so they called my husband, and he guided them to a hospital. And when I got home that Friday afternoon from work, my husband was sitting at the kitchen table looking rather glum, and I said, what's wrong? And then he told me that Marley was very, very sick, and they decided she had meningitis. This, of course, was very distressing to all of us, and we were very, very concerned. Our first thought was prayer. And so John and I sat there at the kitchen table and prayed that whatever was to happen was God's will, but we definitely would love to have Marley saved and all to be well. Marley was treated in that hospital for 12 days, and it was a long 12 days for all of us. She was released, and Jane took her immediately to the plane to come home. And when she came home, she was deaf, totally deaf. You could slam the door as hard as you wanted to, and she never flinched an eye. You could do anything you wanted to, and she just did not respond. She was very frightened because as a year-old, she had forgotten all of us in those 12 days. She was very frightened because she couldn't hear, she couldn't make out what was going on in the world. Again, we prayed. They went to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician said she needs to go to an audiologist, and the audiologist, she was totally deaf at that point. The audiologist said, we've never seen a child any more deaf than this child, and there is no hope of her hearing returning. So I would suggest that all of you go to learn how to do sign language. So we started to think about that and where we were going and how we were going to accomplish this. About 3 weeks more passed, and John and I were taking her home one evening. She'd been at our house on Sabbath afternoon, and her parents had gone to do an errand, and So we were taking her home, and she was sitting in the back seat in her car seat, her little hood tied around her head. And my husband always made funny noises at her, trying to stimulate her. He was determined she was going to hear. And he prayed and prayed. We both did. We all did. Many, many prayers went up for that child. And all of a sudden, as he made this funny little noise, she mimicked him. And we both perked up our ears and looked at each other, and I said, "Do it again." And he did, and she mimicked him again. We stopped by the side of the road and looked at each other and said, she hears, God has answered our prayers. And we stopped and prayed and cried. I am so grateful for the amount of hearing that Marley has. Now, it's not like yours and mine, but she has partial hearing in the one ear, nothing in the other. Marley is a school teacher today, a mom, a wife, and a wonderful friend. And I am so grateful for that healing of her hearing. About 2 years later, there was another beautiful child that came into that same home, a bouncing big 9-pound baby. We loved her to death, and she was just so sweet and wonderful. She was about 6 weeks old when all of a sudden she started crying for no reason, had not had any indication of anything wrong. She'd been checked by the pediatricians and they thought she was fine. But after having gone through this for several days, her mother took her back to the pediatrician, couldn't find anything wrong with her. And he said, "Now, if anything happens that is different, I want you to come back, but I honestly have no idea what's going on with her." Well, it was New Year's Eve, and her parents and Marley and Caitlin were with us and going to have dinner. And Jane was going to change her diaper before dinner. She had her on the family room floor, changing her diaper, and she had been crying very hard up to that point. And all of a sudden, she stopped. But as she stopped crying, there was this very large bulge on the left-hand side of her abdomen. Jane called me and said, "Come, Mom, look at this." I looked at it and I said, "Jane, I have no idea what that is, but I suggest that you go into the ER." They packed her up, didn't even wait for dinner, went into the ER, and it wasn't very long until they called us and said that they were keeping her there. There was a tumor of some kind. They weren't sure yet because they were going to do some kind, much more testing. So we prayed, and we prayed, and we prayed. We called our friends to pray. We called the pastor to pray. Sabbath morning came. We all went to church. It was a sad day, but it was New Year's. And during the church service, I got a call. It was Jane telling me that they had done more tests and that Marley had a tumor on her spine. Caitlin. Caitlin had a tumor on her spine, and that they were going to keep her in the hospital because they were waiting to, over the holiday, the physician that they wanted to do the surgery was gone. Now, I knew this physician. I had worked with him. He was a huge, tall man with hands twice the size of mine. And all I could think of was this person doing surgery on this tiny little girl. Now, I just said that she was 9 pounds and a beautiful child, and she was, but still, in comparison to him, she was tiny. I couldn't fathom what was going to happen, but he was not going to be back in town to do the surgery until Tuesday. This was Sabbath. They were very concerned that the tumor was resting on her spine, and they didn't want her to become incapacitated. And so they knew they had another doctor on call if they needed to, but they had hoped that this one would be back and it would be okay for Tuesday. Tuesday arrived. Well, first Monday night arrived and we had a prayer service. Several of you were there during that prayer service. The nurses came down and said, the doctor is upstairs and he's very anxious for the parents to come up. And so I got sent upstairs to pacify this doctor while they were having a prayer service downstairs. And I went up and I asked every question I could ever think of about what was going to happen, how they were going to do the surgery, everything I could think of, because I was really concerned and I wanted them to go through this prayer service. Just as he said to me, I want to see this child. I don't care what kind of a prayer service they're having. I want to see this child. They came out of the elevator. I was very, very grateful that they had been able to achieve what they had come for, but I was also very grateful to see them because I didn't want him to have any kind of feelings of anger towards any of us. He was very good and explained exactly what he was going to do, and the next day we all gathered and waited. The surgery went well, and Caitlin was not paralyzed in any way. She was moving everything, and they were very happy. But what they discovered was that there was a second tumor, and that was in her abdomen. And with her age being what it was, they couldn't do both surgeries at once. So they wanted to wait a few weeks. They were going to give her chemotherapy and see if that tumor would shrink. The tumor was a neuroblastoma, which is a in utero tumor that has grown while she has been in utero. And it's known in young children. It's not particularly common, but there are a number of cases that we know about. So anyway, we waited and we prayed. In the meantime, the tumor did not seem to shrink very much, but it was time to have the second surgery. We were frightened, and the doctors told us that it would be a long, hard surgery because this was going to have a lot of vessels and nerves involved, and it was going to take them a lot of time to distract or to remove it. So we all went. The surgery was scheduled for 1 o'clock. We were there by 11. We all went and armed with lots of things to do to keep us occupied. My husband refused to go because he said, I have said my prayers. I know that it's going to come out okay. So Jane and Ken and I were there alone. And they took her into the operating room. That's a really hard thing to do, is to hand over your child. But anyway, they took her in, and about an hour and a half, the surgeon came out and he said, is the Rano family here? And I panicked. I knew there were only two things that could have happened. Either this was inoperable or she had died on the table. And so he wanted us to go into the conference room and discuss what had happened. So we went in together, and he said, well, I have only good news for you. This tumor peeled out like a pea. There was no nerve involvement, no blood involvement, no vessel involvement, nothing. And he said she's actually in the intensive care unit right now and is getting ready to go back to her own room. I called my husband and I told him what had happened. He said, I told you so, because God was in charge. And we know that. And we know that she was spared her life. And I'm so grateful because Caitlin is here with us again today. I have both grandchildren who are wonderful, wonderful children. And I want to thank God for every minute that I have with them. And I again want to close with this. When a believing person prays, great things happen.
Good morning again. This really bothers me. What an amazing morning. I'm just awed and humbled at the strong women we have in our church. Last week, when the pastor mentioned what we were going to be wanting to attempt to do, I'm in the audience and I'm sitting there, it's just like, I wonder what I would do. And then I didn't think anything of it. And then I got a text on Wednesday from the pastor. He goes, can you do this? And I'm going, what? So I didn't pray for this, but I'm thinking he did. And so we are answers to his prayers in a sneaky kind of way. Today, I want to share just a little bit of my prayer journey. I don't consider it anything miraculous. I think it's sort of everyday kind of events. But they sort of just roll into each other, reminding me of behind-the-scenes work. I have a small rain garden that grows plants that have long roots growing down to about 10 feet. And the plants above are like, 4 feet. I've got some tall grasses that go 7 feet in the fall. And when the rain garden was first planted, they weren't planted with roots that were 10 feet long. They were planted as seedlings, small, and over the course of years and good rain, stress with drought, reaching for water longer, those roots grow and the plants grow longer too. I'm not a gardener in my family, never claimed to be. We had a quarter-acre garden when I was growing up. I hated it. But my husband is a gardener. He learned it patience from his mom, and they did wonderful things. And so this rain garden is now his baby. It's like, I'll plant the plant, baby, you take care of it, you water it, you do whatever you want with it. And he is out there basically every day from when the first thing for the winter growth starts coming through the mulch in April up and through October when things are just settling down, because the rain garden has different flowers and different plants that will do different things at different stages. And in the spring, after a long winter, I am just desperate for some blossoms and for some blooms. And so when these scraggly looking plants come up, they look like weeds to me, and I'm going, oh, that's got to go, that's going to be in the way, or oh, that shouldn't be there. And he's going, leave it alone. He goes, just leave it alone. He goes, because they have to grow too along with the weeds so that we can determine what's a flower and what's a weed. And he's out there daily from April to October, sometimes more than one day. And he's checking it out, and it's like, that's your baby, you could do that. So this is what he does. And I have learned through that that's his talent. He's watching things, determining what's a weed and what's a flower. And in the spring, when things start blooming, we have huge fat bumblebees that have survived the summer or the winter, and they are just thirsty for those blossoms, and they are just hovering around those rain garden spring blossoms and blooms, and they just love just hanging around there. The dragonflies come out. Didn't know so many dragonflies existed in Minnesota until I saw that rain garden bloom. And then occasionally the hummingbird will come out, and he'll get all excited. He's like, oh, there's a hummingbird in the rain garden, come and see. And he'll have to point it to me because it's like really going around. Oh, sorry about that. And so that's the spring blossoms. Right now we have, somewhere in July and August, we've got the grass shooting up. He was out in the rain garden, in the middle of the rain garden the other day, weeding like he does daily. And these grasses, he's close to 6 feet. These grasses are 7 feet tall, and they're swaying in the wind and whatnot. And somewhere between now and, I'd say between now and September, though the spring blossoms have died down and they're now seeding, and the tall grasses are getting tall and they're starting to seed. Somewhere between now and September, we're going to get the fall blossoms, and we're going to get different colors in a different section of the rain garden, because it's like this section is spring, in the middle it's the tall grasses, and then this section is fall. And we're going to get those sections, and they're going to blossom again as everything else starts dying down. And then the winter's going to come out. And we're going to get the snow drifts that land, because he doesn't want to cut down the plants, because it sort of helps him determine where they're going to grow in the spring if he leaves up the old stuff. So he doesn't cut anything down, which includes the tall grasses. And sometimes he likes to stake them up, like stick thing in there and get a couple ribbons around there and they're tall. Because in the wintertime, when you get these 5-foot drifts or whatever the case may be, the only really thing entertaining in the yard is these tall grasses that are swaying around. And so those will happen in the wind. And then in the dead of winter, when it's sub-zero temperatures like Minnesota loves to throw at us, you'll see those tall grasses just standing tall and brave in the winter. I'd like to think that my prayer journey has been like the cycle of a rain garden. Some of you know I grew up in a large family. I'm number 7 out of 8, and yes, we all have our very own number. We know those numbers, and we know our nicknames well. But my family heritage was in a Methodist congregation with a token attendance at Easter and Christmas. So not a steady environment in my family, and we weren't a large family. Or we weren't a happy family in that. So when I was 8, a local Baptist church came through our neighborhood. We had a large yard along with a couple other houses, and they came to our parents like, can we do a vacation Bible school on your yard? We had some shaded areas, trees areas, and my parents going, sure, if it gets the kids out of the house, go for it. And so this is what they did. I don't remember a lot of that particular week. I know we had about 20 people in our yard, different ages, different stations of the yard, like vacation Bible schools will do, divide and conquer. And but I do remember that year, or that particular week, I had considered the starting of my prayer life. Because at the age of 8, I had asked Jesus to come into my heart and to be my personal friend and Savior. So my 8-year-old self started praying. Knowing the turbulent family I had, I thought, surely I'm adopted. I don't belong in this family. Someone out there must love me. And of course, as a silly 8-year-old, that made sense to me. But over the course of years, God just, helped me grow and to acknowledge where I was in that family dynamics. And at the age of 11, I was baptized into the Adventist Church. I now was adopted into a church family that these church family members, which I include anyone in a church aisle, you are my family members. Thank you for being with me. But that church family in the small South Dakota town that I grew up in started praying for me and supporting me spiritually. And when I got to age of 13, I started another prayer. Got past that, I'm not adopted, I am stuck with these people. But realizing, number 7, you're going to have the same teachers that these people did. And I had gone through that in my elementary grades. I had gone through that to my middle school. I did not want to go through that in my high school. Please, 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 God. And so he answered another prayer. The Harvey, North Dakota Academy had been closing, and they were building a new academy in Bismarck, North Dakota. And as a 14-year-old, my church sponsored me my first year to attend the school. It was a boarding academy, 4.5 hours from home. Had to find a ride up there because my parents were working, and you walk in, we were charter students our freshman year. Walk into a building that's not completed. This is like, what? Like, but I was told there was going to be an indoor pool. I can guarantee you 30 years later, there's still not an indoor pool. And so it's just like, this was the big hype. And the only thing that was really done, the classrooms weren't done. They were still being drywalled and sheetrocked and all that fun stuff. And the dormitory rooms were done. They gave us a bed, they gave us a shower, and we provided our own towels. But we didn't have carpet for the first year. We didn't have a laundry room that was in working condition for the first month, which 2 teenage girls was just outrageous. Hand washing, what? It's like, where am I going to hand it on that what? You know, and so this was an experience. But every year, I prayed and prayed and prayed, and I begged my mother, please let me go back to the academy. I did not want to be in that high school where my older siblings were. I did not want those teachers. And through church sponsorship, 2 years of my mom taking in an adult foster into the family, and a generous teacher sponsor, class sponsorship or scholarship, I was able to go 4 years to that academy, graduating as the charter member class of 21. And like many teen years, my prayer focus was all over the place. Those years were a struggle for me because I did not get along with my classmates for the most part. I really only went for the teenagers, or for the teachers. So I was a quiet child, and I was, thwarted in that. But I had to give up what I thought would make me happy, and learn patience for one more day. You see, God was working behind the scenes, and it wasn't until I was near 22 when I met my husband that I learned how much action was actually happening. I had prayed for someone not to judge me because of who my family was. Still at 22, I was embarrassed by my family. And I knew, I had started dating Adventist men, and I thought, how am I going to explain my family to them? I was the only, my parents were baptized a week after I was, and then my little brother. So we 4 were it, and didn't have a lot of experience. I did not go to the Adventist colleges, didn't have the money. And then I met my husband, and I was afraid, oh, great, he sort of knows some people that I know. And I learned in that behind-the-scenes moment, God had presented my family in small quantities to my husband 7 years before we even actually met. I thought, perfect. I don't have to explain my family to him. He can still like me, and he learned to love me. And he became my emotional rock. I was no longer a scared young person. I felt brave enough to love someone and not worry about what my family was like. So that was a wonderful prayer request. He's not an Adventist. We've been together, considering dating, we've been together over 36 years now. It's not always easy. And there are moments in time where the joy creeps through and God's love shines through, showing me just small victories of where he wants us to be, because I know that God's love is not impeded across denominational barriers. I don't have to worry about that with him. And then when I consider parenthood, yay, parenthood, we start worrying and we start praying more. And God knew what he was doing when he gifted us with one daughter. When I consider a family of 8, I thought I'd have 4, but it's just like, okay, 1, we can do 1, why not? And so we started praying more. You see, each step in prayer is a prayer journey. A person must accept that there is a need that will not be met without intervention of some sort. Whether this intervention is directly from your personal request to God or it is from someone praying for you on your behalf, there is a journey. And the journey to an answered prayer may take longer than you anticipated or lead you into a totally different direction that you never expected. Your journey is your own, so don't rush it. Don't compare your journey to someone else's. Prayer is not a competition of the prayer haves and the prayer have-nots. Accept that God knows what he is doing, even when you feel that you do not. Most prayers are seedlings. Some prayers reveal a weeding process that needs attention before a person considers the prayer answered. This might take years. All prayers have a different answering season to grow and bloom. Depending on the time and energy spent in growing our personal prayer life, we will either have shallow or deep roots as our anchor. And those prayer roots are no guarantee that you will feel in full bloom. Sometimes answered prayers are dormant because they are not ready to bloom yet. Maybe you're part of a root system, supporting the person next to you or reaching out to grow in a different spot. Don't be afraid to pray for someone, especially when they ask. If you don't have a prayer partner, or if you are not a part of a prayer group, begin praying for that unfulfilled need now. Be specific in what you want. Maybe you're a pollinator, not feeling anchored but still on God's mission, right? Don't be afraid of his mission for you. Each step you take in people's lives is well worth it. When your prayer winter is in full force, lift your eyes to your Creator that works behind the scenes and never sleeps. Stand confident that his answer will be reflected in your life in a wondrous and perhaps unexpected event. Two of my favorite old church hymns is number 313, Into My Heart, and number 487, In the Garden. But while I was going to read one of these to you today, I glanced at hymn number 488 at the first I prayed for light. I'd like to read that to you. At first I prayed for light. Could I but see the way, how gladly, swiftly would I walk to everlasting day. And next I prayed for faith, or for strength, that I might tread the road with firm, unfaltering feet and win the heaven's serene abode. And then I prayed for faith. Could I but trust my God, I'd live enfolded in his peace, though foes were all abroad. But now I pray for love, deep love to God and man, living love that will not fail, however dark his plan. And light and strength and faith are opening everywhere. God waited patiently until I prayed the larger prayer. I hope you take time in your prayer garden today. Nurture it by listening to God's voice. Accept his moments of weeding, and don't be afraid of the answers during the dormancy. May you be blessed today, in this moment, and in this breath. Thank you.